we have the highest caliber leadership. We've got CEO caliber leadership in these individual restaurants, and that opens the whole playbook. And you can do things. We still prepare a lot of our products by hand in those restaurants. And well, how's that possible? Well, it's the caliber of leader who attracts the people, because you mentioned earlier about the importance of great people. I'm with you. I'll sing that song, but great people without great leadership is a waste. And you can have great people, but they have to be well led. And so I go back to, I still think it's our competitive advantage. And that enables a lot of really, really good outcomes.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Slow Smoke Business Podcast. I'm your host, Jarrod Morgan. Today, joined by Mark Miller, 45-year veteran of Chick-fil-A. Of course, we all know and love Chick-fil-A, not just for their chicken, but for how well they are run as an organization and how successful they are. And also, he's an author of the book, Culture Rules. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. Now, it's always a little nerve-wracking for me when someone has, especially like you, who has spent over 4 decades kicking out some of the most respected, working for an organization that kicks out some of the most respected culinary stuff in the country, and now I'm going to cook in your presence.
Don't worry about it. I worked in the restaurant a long, long time ago, and I was awful in the restaurant. So you have nothing to fear here.
At first I thought I probably missed an opportunity to cook chicken here, but maybe I saved myself, quite frankly, because there's no doing chicken in the presence of somebody who's so great. So let's show what we're doing today. I'm going to do something actually pretty quick this time, which is some hanger steak. I've never actually done this on the show. If you're following along on Facebook or on YouTube, you can check that out. We've got some hanger steak. I marinated them for not very long, maybe about 30 minutes in coconut aminos, if you're familiar with that. Hashtag not a sponsor, coconut aminos. And do you ever grill out, Mark?
From time to time.
Yeah? What's your go-to thing if you're putting something on the grill?
Yeah, we're pretty simple. Burgers is my go-to.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll get crazy and we'll do bison burgers, but burgers is what I cook on the grill.
I'm going to hit these with a very simple seasoning here. This is a brisket rub, and just a little bit, trying to keep it really simple. It's nice and peppery and salty, and we're going to let that go. It's not going to be on there that long, which means this episode you guys are going to get to watch me eat, for better or worse. That will be fun. So, Mark.
Yes.
I want to talk about where to start, actually, because Chick-fil-A is such an incredible organization. You've been involved for a long, long time. In your mind, what makes Chick-fil-A so different than the other organizations in its space?
Well, there's probably a lot, but I would say our primary distinctive are the operators, the men and women that run the local restaurants. I think they're our competitive advantage. Now, we've got great food, we've got great locations, we've got great team members. Oh, I would say those team members are a reflection of that operator, because those team members work for that local operator. And I think it was actually part of Truett's genius. I mean, he was a really smart guy, and he figured out a lot of things. He invented the chicken sandwich, give him props for that. But the business model, here's the way he thought about it. He said, you need 2 things for a successful business. Now, he's articulating this. This was 55 years ago when he kind of had this insight. He said, you need 2 things for a successful business. You need capital and management. He said, but the problem is, if you look for those in the same person, your pool becomes very small. He said, so if we provide the capital, the number of men and women who have the talent and the desire to run the business, that's huge. So from the very beginning, we put up the cash and these independent operators provide the leadership. And so the way that has played out over the years, and I would argue it played out this way early on, but today specifically, when our operators are running multi-million-dollar businesses. I talked to an operator last week who has a couple of locations, and he's going to do $30 million this year.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
how many locations does he have?
I think he's got 2 locations.
Wow.
Now he also does some food service on a college campus. So I guess it's 2.25 locations. But the point being is we are able, the operators are able to do these huge volumes because of the caliber of their leadership. Mm-hmm. And so they in fact attract great people, and then those people are well led, and the sky's the limit at that point. So Truett's insight, and again, I still believe our competitive advantage is that local restaurant operator.
Yeah. So every great business is about its people, right? I've said that, I don't know how many times on this show, but the people was really the success. If anybody, with my story, people were like, what was your secret to success? It was attracting and motivating great people to want to work with you, right? Because if you're able to do that, man, the problems, they don't get easier, but if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? That's what I've always said. And so you want to make sure that you focus on that. But what's so different, I think, with Chick-fil-A, for me at least, is that the battles that you guys fight, at least I'd say in the last 20 years, the business battles that you're fighting are so public. And so an example of that is it's gotten so popular that we've had to watch. So I'm here in Hoover, Alabama. We've had to watch our local Chick-fil-A's have to reinvent the drive-through experience, right? A true victim of their own success, because there are so many people trying to pile through that place in a square footage that was not invented for that. And so, talk about how that organization tackles challenges like that are just, even though they're coming from, a place of success, like there's so many people wanting to buy lunch from you guys, that you have to reinvent that, but it still makes people angry when you get it wrong. So what is the process like? How do you attack a problem that's so emotional but so vital to get right?
Okay, there's a lot in that question. So let me take it and look at it from a couple of different angles really quick here. First, I go back to my opening comment. Our competitive advantage is that local operator. We have some world-class leaders in these individual locations. So they play their role, and then we do what we can do corporately. I mean, there are things that they can't do. And so we'll invest in technology or equipment, research and development, those things that, again, are appropriate for us to do as the parent company. And then they're innovating, they're reinventing at the street level, right? At the point of sale. And then we partner with them to solve those types of challenges, because we believe that the reward you get for solving a problem is a bigger problem. And so leaders have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
That's a great line. Like, I just don't want that to flow by that fast. Like, you say that one more time.
Well, the problem you get for solving a problem is a bigger problem.
Yes.
Because if you can't solve today's problems, you're not going to have bigger problems.
Amen to that.
And so we are aware. We're constantly doing things to try and serve the operators. We're also trying to do things. We don't want to do things that will impede their success and effectiveness. I'll give you an example, is milkshakes. Goodness gracious. I would say we had some restaurants selling milkshakes probably 3 or 4 years before we went chain wide with milkshakes, because we kept saying we got to take another 10 seconds, another 20 seconds, another 30 seconds off of the prep time, because even though people loved the milkshakes from day one, it took too long to make them, which would have thrown a wrench into the whole thing. Those drive-through lines, they would be even longer than they are today if people would give us the time to get in the lines. And so we worked for several years corporately trying to shave the time down so that we didn't unintentionally make their lives harder and make the business more complex.
Yeah, I think that's an easy trap to fall into as a business, right? You try to go, and like from the outside, people are like, why don't you, what's the deal? Why can't we all have milkshakes? I know there's this one, I've heard on the internet that there's this one Chick-fil-A that has the peach milkshake and I want it. But it comes down to exactly that. When you are a business that is doing the scale, and we're not even talking about like the global scale, but the scale of each individual location.
Yeah.
Scale is a thing that is hard to understand until you've truly had to manage it as a business before.
Well, sure. And there's one more piece, and that is the fact we are a brand. And so people's expectations are the same. That you do yourself more harm than good if you said, well, this restaurant will have milkshakes and this restaurant won't, or this restaurant will offer, these menu items and not over here. People expect consistency from a brand. So we've got both issues. One, the scale at the local restaurant, and the customer's expectation of brand continuity.
So I promised myself I was going to ask this question, and you don't have to answer it because you're not speaking for Chick-fil-A here. But I feel like what you just said indicates a little bit as to why why we don't have chicken and waffles at Chick-fil-A. Like Chick-fil-A has the greatest of all time fast breakfast out there. It wiped everybody off. It reset the game. When Chick-fil-A came out because remember, originally people were like chicken for breakfast, and now it is the thing that everybody defaults to when they want a breakfast on a Saturday morning, right? And it feels like it's right there. You've got incredible chicken you're already making, and just a simple waffle. What has that ever been discussed before? I feel like it has. Is that what's the story there?
Yeah. It's been discussed, and it's been tested and piloted, and prototypes have been created, and we have not yet cracked the code. Customers expect the food that Chick-fil-A serves to meet a certain standard. And we love that, and we appreciate that. And we've spent decades trying to establish that standard in the heart and mind of our customers. And until we can do it exceptionally well, yeah, you're not going to see chicken and waffles.
That's so interesting to me. And I actually figured that's what your answer was going to be. And that's why I asked it right after you talked about scale and the milkshakes thing, because I'm sure if we walked in and asked you to create a plate of a Chick-fil-A chicken breast and waffles one time, you could nail it and it would be awesome and we'd all be high-fiving. But
yeah,
again, going back to scale, how do you scale that across all of your locations, doing it consistently in a way that people expect?
Right. Because keep in mind, and I won't quote specific numbers because I'm not current as of this moment, but our restaurants on average are doing 6 to 8 times the industry average. And then we have the outliers. A $30 million in 2 restaurants is a bit of an outlier. So it's that level of scale. It's 10 or 15 times some of the fast food restaurants that you're going to drive by today. That's the volume we're doing. And then, of course, when you look at it across the chain, we'll exceed $20 billion in sales this year. And so scale is a daily reality for the operator and for us corporately.
Things are done differently at Chick-fil-A, and that's what I want to talk about. As I'm going to check the chicken. Check the meat. Check the hanger steak. Right. I tried to. Maybe I should have just hit it a little faster, but I tried to slow it down just because I wanted to get a little smoke over it. But I don't want it to get that done, so it probably needs about 2 minutes, and then we're done. Chick-fil-A does things differently, right? And do you think? Is that this is a chicken or the egg question, right? Does Chick-fil-A do things differently because it's so successful, or is it so successful because it does things differently?
Yeah, probably. I mean, again, I think it goes back to Truett and his genius. We have the highest caliber leadership. We've got CEO caliber leadership in these individual restaurants, and that opens the whole playbook. And you can do things, we still prepare a lot of our products by hand in those restaurants. And well, how's that possible? Well, it's the caliber of leader who attracts the people, because you mentioned earlier about the importance of great people. I'm with you. I'll sing that song, but great people without great leadership is a waste. And you can have great people, but they have to be well led. And so I go back to, I still think it's our competitive advantage. And that enables a lot of really, really good outcomes.
But so every episode we have here, we have a clip that starts off the show before to get people interested as it comes. That's probably the clip right there, because that was so good. Great people without great leaders can't do what you want them to do. The Kathy, so you mentioned Truett, and for those that aren't familiar with Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy was the founder, ran the Dwarf House for a long time, started experimenting with chicken, turned it into Chick-fil-A, pioneered kind of the mall food approach, took that by storm. I remember being a kid and going to the mall specifically to get a chicken sandwich and a lemonade, right? Because that was the only place you could get them.
Right.
And then, eventually branched out into, actual single locations and now dominates that space. The Cathy family, obviously Truett passed away a few years back, and now Dan Cathy and everybody's in charge. Let's talk about that leadership style, because I've read Truett Cathy's books. I quote him a lot. One of my favorite sayings of Truett Cathy is, "I'd rather restrain Mustangs than kick mules," which I talk about that all the time when I'm hiring. And I think you think about him saying that in the early days, and how you're talking about how you have CEO level people in your individual locations. I think that still sort of permeates who you guys are. But if you could sum up Cathy leadership, right, whether it's Truett or Dan, how would you describe that?
I think they actually embody our leadership point of view as an organization. Now, they were doing this before we codified our point of view. So I want to be really clear. And we didn't say, hey, what do Truett and Dan do? We went to work to say, what are the fundamentals that great leaders have demonstrated throughout history, and we believe they will demonstrate into the future. And we did a lot of work on that. This is about 25 years ago. And then lo and behold, when we finally reached our conclusions, it's like, oh yeah, that's what Truett does. And so the picture of leadership is an iceberg. And I don't know if you remember fifth grade. I don't, but they tell me in fifth grade we studied icebergs, and that about 10% above the waterline represents the skills of the leader, and the 90% below the waterline represents their heart or their character. Wow. And so Truett has demonstrated skills and the integrity of heart that such that people want to follow him. And so I think that's our point of view on leadership.
Do you train leadership to the leaders in your organization, or do you try to, I guess you certainly go pick people that match your culture, but do you guys have specific leadership training?
We do have leadership training. Let me put an asterisk on that. The operators are independent business leaders. So management and leadership practices are at the sole discretion of that independent operator, but they are well aware of our point of view, and we've created resources that they can use or not use. But to your earlier point, we're trying to select people who can be successful in our context. And so there is an affinity for leadership comprised of skills and heart that's resident in each individual operator. Now, how they play that out, we give them huge discretion. I mean, again, they're our competitive advantage. We selected them fundamentally for their leadership. And so you'll see different permutations and different manifestations of that. But we do provide some initial, we call it the fundamentals of restaurant leadership. And we spend 4 to 6 weeks with those new recruits and then we encourage them, and we have other things that unify us. We get together every year with all the operators, their spouses, all the staff and their spouses. We had over 9,000 folks at our meeting in February. We'll have over 10,000 at this next meeting. And we talk about these things. And again, the operators have full discretion for the way they lead their individual restaurant, but we do have some influence there.
You only can do that if you pick great people, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you cannot run an organization like you guys run without great people and also give them autonomy.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the beef off here while we're talking, but I want to ask you about let's call it playing the long game. Okay.
All right.
Chick-fil-A to me is the master of playing the long game. So if you look at you guys versus any other restaurant expansion chain that's sort of gone out there. And I don't know if chain's the right word or if that's an offensive term. And if it is, forgive me. But there's so many chances that other restaurants come across, other organizations come across that you guys have to get a pop of growth, right? And so open on Sundays, right? Or just pick anybody to run your restaurant and just make sure you get more locations. And you'd get like a quick sugar high of growth from that. But there's very specific reasons that Chick-fil-A has been very public about why you guys refuse to do those things. Is that, maybe somebody doesn't discuss it that way in your organization, but to me, those are like playing the long game decisions because if you guys opened on Sundays next month, there would be a huge surge of Sunday sales that you guys go, wow. But then all these other things that you guys have stood for all these years and all these like cultural things and all of that stuff would start to shake and smoke a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So is that something you guys discuss internally about thinking long term, or is that just because you guys have resolute standards and you never break them? Or how do you think about those long range decisions like that?
Okay. Well, I heard a lot there. So I would say that we have a bias that the best decisions are always made with a long-term perspective.
Okay.
As a principle, as a rule, like the best decisions are always made with a long-term perspective. Yes, you certainly have to think about the near-term consequences, but we think there's some judgment required to think, and then what, and then what, and then what. And we ask a question often, what do we want to be true in a decade that's not true today? And I, by the way, think that's a fantastic question. I have a bias because it's one of my favorite, because I think it's true for your family, for your health, for your fitness, for your finances, for your career. It's like if you can maintain that perspective, a lot of the decisions that you need to make to make that a reality become much clearer. And so I'll start with the bias. The best decisions are always made with a long-term perspective. Now, we have the luxury of that. I know many of your listeners do not, because they're publicly traded and they're trying to hit some 90-day numbers. So all of a sudden they're going, well, we have to make a short-term decision. I feel for you. I actually, I don't know how, I mean, that I've never had to lead like that. Yeah. To me, that would be such a paradigm shift. I think it might, in fact, be why so many organizations are overmanaged and underled, is because they've narrowed the time perspective so much that their worldview and their perspective has been distorted by an arbitrary time horizon. And the bigger the more organization, the more complex the organization, significant sustainable change, I would argue, is in many, many cases impossible in a 90-day window.
For sure. Well, I mean, you say 90-day window, but I mean, in today's world, CNBC, I mean, they're picking winners and losers every day.
Right. Right.
And
I just meant quarterly earnings. I mean, quarterly earnings
for sure. But I mean, you're looking at things going on a daily basis. And You said something there I thought was really interesting. What do you mean by over-managed and under-led?
Well, I think managers tend to think about control. They tend to think about today. They tend to think about maintain. And leaders are thinking about growth. Leaders are thinking about progress. Leaders are thinking about not controlling, but releasing. And leaders the best leaders treat people as individuals. Managers want to treat everybody the same. Here's the rule, here's the policy. Well, that's not how you lead people. That's not how you lead them well. And so I think some of that could be driven by these time constraints. So I don't actually know how to lead under those circumstances. I feel very fortunate that I've not had to do that. Now, for your listeners, you may, well, why didn't you have to do that for all these decades? Well, because we're a privately held organization. And so we literally are and are in the process of creating a multi-generational business, because Truett founded it. Dan, you mentioned earlier, his son was the CEO. Dan has now stepped down, and his oldest son, Andrew, is the CEO. And so, and he's already talking about the next generation. And so when you've got a generational view, you just see the world differently.
Yeah, I think it is. And when you stop thinking, like you said, 24-hour, 90-day cycles, and you start thinking generational cycles, yeah, you really do. Again, for those that don't know this, we've got one of our producers is from the UK, so she's not super up to what's going on, but Chick-fil-A is not open on Sundays, and literally every other restaurant chain that's out there is, right? And it's so counterintuitive, except when you think that they sell more in 6 days that frankly could sell more in 4 days than everybody else sells in 7, right? And the people are happier, and it just doesn't seem to hurt the organization at all. But it could, it's one of those things where you study successful organizations, and the most successful organizations have core beliefs about who they are and how they're going to operate and how they're going to treat their people and their customers. And the ones that are generationally successful, they never sort of change that. There's the Good to Great book by Jim Collins, a great business book. And he talks about that the greatest organizations that remain successful over long periods of time, they have beliefs that never change, right? And they will change with the times on some things, but there are some things that they sort of, never do, right? They talked a lot about Southwest Airlines, how for decades they only flew one plane, right? Everybody else is flying like 100 different planes. Southwest fly one plane. Why? Because they got really good at the maintenance, and it was an efficiency thing. And I think it's hard. It's hard. Simplicity is hard, right? It's hard to stay simple. It's hard to stick to these guns because you see everybody's showing you a chart that shows growth if you make a different decision. But those are short range things, right? And it's hard not to fall into that. So if I asked you what Chick-fil-A, you've been around a long time, what do you think Chick-fil-A is the most proud of over the last 40 years? If you were to ask somebody in that organization, what are they the most proud of? What do you think the answer would be? Or maybe I asked you to answer it for yourself. What are you the most proud of that Chick-fil-A has done in the last 40 years?
I'm proud. I'm thankful that we have had an opportunity to impact so many lives. And start at wherever you want to start. Let's start with the communities that our operators serve, their team members. This year, I would anticipate that we'll have over 400,000 team members that will work for those operators. And you do the math on that over the years. Of course, it always hasn't, it's been a smaller number in the past. It continues to grow, but millions and millions of team members. So you've got communities, you've got team members, you've got customers that say we've actually made a difference in their lives. And then the charities that we've been able to support over the years. I would be most thankful for the good that we've been able to do in the world.
What do you think other organizations can learn from Chick-fil-A?
Well, let me quickly say, and again, as a former Chick-fil-A member, I don't know if you mentioned this, but I just retired. I don't know if we even
Hey, wait a second. No, wait a minute.
Did you not know that? I just retired.
How long ago?
It's crazy. Just a couple of months back. And they called it an early retirement, which I thought was kind of weird because I've been there 44 and a half years. How long do you have to stay to get a full retirement? But as an officer in the company, thank you. But as an officer in the company, I had a mandatory retirement date in the future. And since I went early, I got an early retirement. So
I see.
So I want to offer that as a caveat. But I'll speak for my time at the table. As you ask what others can learn from us, we have not got it figured out. Now, maybe that's what some other people could learn. I've spent the last 25 years of my life specifically trying to benchmark best practices from organizations all over the world because we want to get better. And we've studied teams, we've studied execution, we've studied engagement. We've done 12 of these projects over 25 years. The most recent you mentioned earlier was culture. We said, we want to strengthen our culture. And so maybe, I think it clearly has contributed to our success. I don't know if other people could learn from that or not, but we have not figured it out. We need to improve virtually every facet of our business needs to be better. And so that is the mission that we're on. We want to be better. And that drives us.
I think so. Speaking as an entrepreneur myself, I've spent a lot of time reading about Chick-fil-A with admiration and trying to learn from the successes and the ways that you guys overcame struggles and things through the years. And what you just said there, I think to me is a big takeaway that I haven't had on the show in a while, which is you said Chick-fil-A hasn't got it figured out. Now, when you say that out loud, it makes sense, but it's important, I think, for everybody to hear that as somebody else who's trying to build an organization or anybody else that's trying to build you look at some organizations and think, well, if anybody's got it figured out, it's probably those guys, right? Mm-hmm. And so to hear you verbalize, nah, we don't have it figured out, sort of drives home the point that you never figure it out. You just make progress, right?
That's right.
And then as soon as you get close to the answer, the question changes. And you talk about, you said it earlier, right? The rewards you get for solving problems is bigger problems. And so in that sense, when you're on that hamster wheel, it probably feels like you never figure it out. And I think that's an important takeaway for people that are banging their head against the wall. Even like I am, as I'm building some organizations, I'm banging my head against the wall. Like, why can't this thing just work but that's the way it always is, right? And it's in those moments where you sort of figure out how to make a little bit of margin, a little bit of progress, and those things stack up into bigger and better organizations.
Because as you said, as you progress, the questions are going to change.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you'll start trying to apply yesterday's answers to today's questions. And I'll just throw out a little anecdote for any history buffs that are listening. Arnold Toynbee did a study of the rise and fall of 21 civilizations. So get your head around that. Okay. And he was trying to figure out what happened and was there anything in common in those 21 civilizations. And one of the things he discovered that was a sign of the demise was when leaders began to apply yesterday's answers to today's questions.
Whoa.
The same is true in organizations. And so that's why you can't stop, because the questions are changing. And if you don't understand that the questions are changing, you will have the wrong answers.
Wow. Okay. Well, by the way, I've been sitting here smelling this hanger steak.
Yeah, I was going to say, how's that? I was going to ask you how that steak is.
I hadn't got into it yet, so let's give it a try.
I should have come to your place for this recording.
Oh my God. That's actually really good. So the coconut aminos on that. Hello.
All right.
Good. What's your, while I'm chewing, what is your favorite thing on the Chick-fil-A menu?
Wow. Yeah, I like a lot of it, but I'm probably going to go back to the nuggets. I've liked the nuggets for a long time. I love the nuggets.
Nuggets are Nuggets are, it's probably it's probably the crunchiest nugget out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Naturally crunchy, not fake crunchy, but like naturally crunchy. Tell me about this pimento cheese sandwich thing. I don't know. You just retired a few months ago, so I don't know how plugged in.
Oh, I know. I know about it. And I got a taste test early on that. I used to be on the, what did we call that? Not the menu. I was on the menu strategy team for a while and other
that sounds like a job that
teams.
doesn't stink, right? You'd be on the menu.
It was great.
The menu team.
Yeah, I love that sandwich. And the early reports have been very, very positive on that sandwich. Yeah.
It seems like a departure for you guys though, right? Like it just feels like it's a little out there. Departure is probably not the right word. It just feels like everything Chick-fil-A does is very repeatable, and it just feels like a big old dollop of pimento cheese. How did you guys figure out how to control that aspect of things?
That's right? Repeatable. You can put that on as many sandwiches as you want. Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say this about that. I have, even in recent years, not been on the menu strategy team, but I've been plugged into some of those decisions. And we continue to listen to the customers. I mean, yeah, it'd be real simple if people just wanted the traditional sandwich and that's all they wanted, and they wanted it forever. We're working, and we think we will keep it forever, and there is a place for it, but we want the menu to remain relevant. And so we listen to customers. We test hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of menu items a year, trying to figure out what we need to do to maintain relevance in the minds of the customer. And then that leads us to try things like this sandwich, and we pilot and we test, and we do other things before we go chain wide. One is to be sure that we can operationally pull it off. Back to the milkshake example, even if it's a great product, if we can't pull it off, that's going to be counterproductive. So
for sure,
trying to maintain relevance.
Yeah. By the way, what happened with the breakfast bagel? Like that, the bagel breakfast sandwich was my all-time go-to. I ordered probably 400 of those, and I shouldn't say that. My doctor listens to this, but like I ordered a lot of those and loved that sandwich. And then it's you guys are revamping the breakfast stuff, it went away.
Yeah, I don't have specific knowledge on that, but my hunch would be a lot of your friends didn't order 400 of them. So that would be my first hunch.
They're like, this Morgan guy in Alabama is keeping us afloat with that one.
And secondly, we're trying to manage overall complexity. We've actually got goals to take complexity out of the restaurant, because that's really one of the few levers we have as volumes continue to grow, because the footprint's not going to get any bigger. The restaurants have a fixed square footage. And so we've actually, I don't know that it was true in this particular case, but we've made menu deletions because it reduces complexity, or we've got another product that we would like to bring in that we think customers would appreciate even more. So we have to make those trade-offs all the time. Just
that makes sense. I mean,
physical constraints.
As a hungry guy, I want it, but as put my business hat on, I'm like, well, that is the only thing on the menu with a bagel, right? And so if it's not selling, that's a lot of complexity for kind of one item, right?
Yeah. Or if you want to bring in the pimento cheese, if you want to do that instead, it's like, which of these is actually going to serve a larger number of our guests? You make some of those kind of trade-offs as well.
I've heard more people talk about the pimento cheese thing than probably ever talked about the bagel, but I'm team bagel. I think what I'm going to do is just start getting my own bagels.
Okay.
And just deconstructing a Chick-fil-A breakfast sandwich and reassembling a bagel.
Bring your own bagel. Yeah, you can start that. You can start that trend.
I'll do that movement. The movement starts here. Mark, this was such a great conversation, and if it didn't come out in this conversation, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and your career and the organization that you served for so long. And so thank you for sharing some of your wisdom with us today. I wish you were here having some of this steak with me. But maybe at some point we can get together and you can teach me a little about chicken, and I'll show you how I can bumble through a steak.
I'll look forward to that.
So the book is Culture Rules, and where can they find that?
Anywhere you buy books, Amazon, wherever you buy books, you can get Culture Rules.
Culture Rules by Mark Miller, and he's schooling us about anything and everything we can learn from Chick-fil-A and company culture. Thank you, Mark, for being here.
It's my pleasure.
There, what? Look, he nailed it. Look at that. I love it. Okay, thanks, Mark. We'll talk to you soon. Hey, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you follow us, like us on social media. If you got something valuable out of this episode, please share it with a friend. I'm sure Mark would appreciate that. Go check out his book, and we'll see you next time on Slow Smoke Business.